Hello, happy people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at one of Arthur Machen's most influential short stories that he's ever published. It was published in the collection, The Three Imposters in 1895. This is the novel of the Black Seal, which I'll be giving it 8 out of 10 to. Now this was in a published in a collection. It was not warmly received by the British public. In fact, he'll actually go in and he'll edit out the word entrails and some other things from this collection. It's episodic in nature, and a lot of these short stories, like this one, have been published in collections that have not published The Three Imposters as a whole. It was republished in 1972 by the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series, although it's more, I feel like it's probably more horror than fantasy, but it was published by Lynn Carter. And in fact, I think Lynn Carter is the most influential editor in the fantasy genre ever because of the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series. He put a lot of things on the map in a major way, and I'll link you below to my place where I made that case for you in an article in a video called "The Case for Carter." So I'll link you to the Case for Carter below. But anyway, this short story was heavily influential on a lot of different things. For example, H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos works, the Call of Cthulhu, the Dunwich Horror, and the Whisper in Darkness. And in one of his letters that he writes to a lot of his people that he writes at a lot of stuff at the time, he was a huge epistolarian. And one of the letters he actually compares the Whisper in Darkness and some of the beats and some of the notes to this short story, the novel The Black Seal by Arthur Machen. Similarly, it was very influential on Robert E. Howard's stuff, like for example The Worms of the Earth, which is also in the Cthulhu mythos. It takes a lot of beats from this, and Robert E. Howard himself admitted some of these influences. So this short story is heavily influential on a lot of stuff that would come to follow in the next generation. I consider this a Generation Zero short story in the Cthulhu mythos. So in a previous story, what I do is I tell you what my generations are. And Generation 1 is the first generation when H.P. Lovecraft is writing with contemporaries. He's creating the Cthulhu mythos with stories like the Call of Cthulhu, and contemporaries like the Hounds of Tindalos by Frank Belknap Long, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith. Many of his contemporaries are writing short stories in the Cthulhu mythos and sharing a lot of these sort of takes. And I consider that Generation 1, and I consider there be 4 generations since then. The current generation, Generation 4, for about 20-25 years from after Lovecraft's death until about 1960, from 1960 roughly, with the publication of the Cthulhu mythos to the publication of the new Cthulhu mythos by Ramsey Campbell for the next 20 years, and then from that up till now. And I feel like each of them have different beats and feel different ways. One mythos is controlled by Lynn Carter, one mythos is controlled by August Derleth, one mythos is sort of up for everybody, although it's probably really controlled by Lovecraft. And then the last one is sort of up for grabs by anybody. All the oxen free. So those are my sort of four generations. But then I also say in that video that I also have a Generation Zero. And these are stories that were published before Generation 1 that were either incorporated elements or created elements that were incorporated or heavily influential on the mythos. And I consider the novel The Great Seal to be a Generation Zero short story in the Cthulhu mythos under my things. And it's not the only short story by Arthur Machen, nor the only story in this collection, The Three Imposters, from 1895's, to be in Generation Zero either. And we'll look at some of those later on as I do my deep dive into Arthur Machen. Now, I'm doing a deep dive into Arthur Machen here recently with this collection that was published in 2011 from Penguin Classics that I will link you to below. I'll also try to find you a copy of this short story, the novel The Black Seal, as well. Now, this collection was criticized by a lot of people. Either some people said it just went way too far, or some people felt that it was overly Rich Stevensonian in character. By a lot of contemporary artists. But it's definitely something that I think has worn the test of time quite nicely. I read it last night. It took me about 2 days for me to knock it out. It took me about an hour and a half or so, probably a little bit less or a little bit more based on how long I was reading it for each day. So I knocked it out over 2 days because it is a little bit longer side of things, and he is a denser writer, so it takes me longer, and it may take you longer for you to knock it out. But here in this admittedly oversized collection, it was about 40 pages or so. I knocked out roughly 20 pages a day for the novel The Black Seal. So anyway, the novel The Black Seal is very interesting because it has a common theme in Arthur Machen's works. Arthur Machen was a spiritualist. And what I mean by that is, he was somebody who believed a lot of things were happening, like ghost stories, fairies, these sorts of things had a reality to them, that there were some real things that existed to this. And the common sort of beliefs and mores of the day in Victorian society were materialists. People who did not believe that these things actually existed. And so he is a spiritualist, though. He's a dyed-in-the-wool spiritualist. And so this short story, as well as to a greater degree the previous one, The Inmost Light, that we've already reviewed for you, as well as some other ones that he has done, have a sort of dichotomy. Two main characters that are spiritualists and materialists. And as a general rule, the spiritualist is going to try to convince the materialist of the truthness of what they're trying to say. To say that there is a truth to the matter, there are things like ghosts that actually do exist, and fairies that actually do exist, and these sorts of things. Right, and then there's a truth to these things, and so this short story has that as well. Our main protagonist is a female, which is actually quite unusual for this era. Her father dies when she's young. She's out in the countryside. She was born poor. She is self-educated. She moves to London, and she was trying to find a job. After about a month or so of looking for a job, she's unable to find them, so she just decides to commit suicide on her way out, leaving her governess behind. She gets hired as a governess by a professor who is a spiritualist, although she's more of a materialist at the beginning, although she'll become a spiritualist after the events of this short story. And then she's telling this short story, this great gentleman, this great respected professor, who appears like a materialist to the materialist, but was actually super secretly a spiritualist, who believed that there were truths to these matters, things actually existed, and we'll find out that actually happens. And about 1/4 of this short story is the collection, is the written documentation of this professor, the last fourth. And then the rest of the 3/4 of the short story then are her telling this short story after the first few pages that sort of present things, sort of present what actually happening, what's actually the truth of the matter, and so forth. And that's taking place. So anyway, that's the core part of this short story. I think Arthur Machen does the found document in this short story, which is a common sort of narrative device in horror. I think it does a good job here. I think it's the story's credit. Arthur Machen is an incredibly strong writer, so I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 again. It's very well done. It's very well fleshed out. There's a lot of fun things that are happening in this short story. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read the novel The Black Seal or other things from the Three Imposters? Other things by Arthur Machen? What do you think? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers? I make my reviews spoiler free, so in case people have heard about Arthur Machen or heard about the novel The Black Seal or his collection of Three Imposters but have never actually taken it out, I have an opportunity to say, yeah, I want to check that out too. There's a lot of fun stuff happening in there. I came to Arthur Machen based on my love of the Cthulhu mythos. I loved Lovecraft and did a big inspiration of him. So I read a collection from him published by KSEM in about 2005 or so. I did a deep dive. But since then, I really haven't touched the guy except for 1 or 2 short stories here and there in collections. So I wanted to do a deep dive, read a bunch of stuff that I haven't read or haven't read in a while, like novel The Black Seal. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. What do you think about it in the comments below? If you like this video, please feel encouraged to hit that subscribe button. There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.